Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. Give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain upon the earth, whether a tree falls in the south or to the north. In the place where it falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As for you, you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in the mother's womb. So you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening do not let your hands be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Ecclesiastes 11. People sometimes ask, what does God want me to do? There are aspects of this in terms of morality, in terms of learning his ways, and in terms of taking scripture, and in terms of moving forward, where we know what the will of God is. But Ecclesiastes chapter 11 ends up saying, do not be afraid to try different things. Do not be afraid to diversify what you put your energy into. Do not be afraid to try things and then ultimately to fail. Because what we have in the life that we have is we have time. And the time that God has given us is opportunity for experimentation. And I see people who live lives, and sometimes the lives they live, there are aspects of what has happened that they have failed at. And typically, when you take a look at people who ultimately will have success, you find out that along the path and along the way, when they were pursuing, trying to learn, they did multiple things that caused them to fail. And sometimes we live our lives in a fashion where we just do not want to fail. But sometimes the greatest lessons that you can get are when you have taken something on and you have utterly and absolutely failed. And the failure only marks you if it's the last time that you try. And one of the great sadnesses of our generation are people who try, who fail, and who give up, who allow the failure to define them. You should not be a person who allows failure to define you. If you believe that you have a creator who has made you for purpose, you need to understand that he has a path for you, and you ultimately will succeed because you have been designed by him for his purpose to be a blessing to the generation that you live in. And so I really want to encourage people who have tried and have failed. You're not done. I want to encourage people who are working in an area, and it seems to be working pretty well right now for you, to understand that if you take a risk, have a multiplicity of ways in which you divide up your efforts and your energies. Do different things in a fashion whereby different things could succeed. Because some of the things you do will fail. Some of the things you do will not be good enough. But sometimes what God does in allowing you to fail, he works things out in a fashion whereby something failed so that something else that was after it could succeed. I'm a rabbi, But as a Messianic rabbi, as a rabbi who believes that Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah, I have a community, and I care for my community. But I wasn't always a rabbi. I have had many interests. I have many things that I have done. I have things that I have learned along the way. I learned how to record audio back before digital existed on analog recording tape. I learned how to record on audio cassettes, which is an ancient and primitive technology at this point in time. I learned how to take photographs when cameras used film. And you would buy film from Kodak or Fuji or BASF or AGFA, which were major chemical companies which would make pieces of plastic and then coat them with photosensitive solutions that had silver nitrous on them such that they would respond to light in specific ways. I had no idea when I was a young man that by becoming a rabbi and by having a community, I would need to have the skills, or I would make use of the skills anyway, of making audio easy on people's ears and putting together systems that could allow people to hear life and truth proclaimed. I had no idea when I was learning how to use cameras between 13 and 16 years old that one day there would be a regular use of video in my world, using optics and using all sorts of technologies that weren't even imagined when I was a teenager. I had no idea that the different things that I would pursue, the different things that I would learn, the different things that I would experiment with would all end up coming together for the purpose of building an ability to communicate. And so I just want to encourage you, because there are things that you're going to do and you're going to go, well, I'm done with that. And if God is leading you on your path, it is quite possible that every aspect of what you have put together in your life, every stop along the way, has contributed to making you into a person that God has designed for the purpose of doing what no other individual in your frame or in your reality could possibly ever do. And it's also possible that God's going to bring other people into your world and into your life such that as you collaborate with what you bring from the long path that you've been on to others, that you guys will all work together in order to see something amazing happen and take place. So I'm a firm believer that God wastes nothing and uses everything. I'm a firm believer that the dividing your efforts into learning a variety of things, cast your bread on the waters, cast them in 7 different directions, yes, even 8. Understand that the way that God has opened up opportunity, the way God has given you passion and interest to learn and to do things, that this is ultimately going to come together. And as this ultimately comes together, God is going to show you that different aspects of your education, different aspects of the technology that you had, the interests that you had, the other things that came together, different aspects of the influence of people in your lives who ended up seeding into you so you would have interests and you would have ability to do things, that this was all going to come together in such a fashion where you would end up bringing it together to be a distinctive person who was created by God. And you know, one of the things that's funny to me, okay, and mind you, I was able to earn a master's degree in theology. I was able to earn a doctor of ministry and was able to do some significant research on the relationship between Jewish people and the church, I was able to do a whole variety of things over the course of my life. But you've got a guy here who didn't do well academically in elementary school. You've got a guy here who failed out of his first year of college. You have a guy here who, when he met the woman that he wanted to marry, and he did marry her, and he had 5 kids with her, she also failed out of a college before getting a college degree as well. And so there are setbacks that people have, and I know that setbacks are painful when you have them. I know that rejection is painful. I know there was a point in time where I applied for a job in New York City, and I applied to 150 different businesses. And I got one interview out of 150 cold calls in an industry, and at the end, the guy who interviewed me thought there was something wrong with me and thought I was on drugs when I was the straightest arrow that I'm sure that he'd ever interviewed. But there was academic failure. There was failure to break into an industry that I really believed that I already had experience and a call to. There were other things that ended up happening along the way. And in terms of ministry, I could tell you stories about congregational splits. I could tell you stories about losing relationships with people who were beloved. I can tell you stories about people dying before it appeared to really be their time, and the distress and the difficulty that families went through when people were prematurely pulled out of this present age. I can tell you all kinds of other stories about things, but understand that the failure that you face, that the loss that you face, that the things that go on as you're seeking to make life fruitful and effective, that these things are all part of the path, part of the purpose, and part of the way that God prepares you to be a person who can be a blessing to others. Shalom.